Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We have conference of parties. We have Fukushima nuclear news to get to. And we'll get to it right after we play an opening song. Atomic Corruption is the name of the song. James Lucid on YouTube. I'll be right back. I'm a bit slow tonight. My apologies.
Built the plant in 53, Pike and Portsmouth DOE. U-235 in the groundwater chain. Heavy metals drift with rain. They cracked the pipes, they dropped the shell. Still denied what tests could tell. Open air, no tent in place. Children sick, no public trace. Atomic corruption, filed it safe, never discussed. Paper trail burned to dust. You won't find what you won't trust. Atomic corruption, carried down the river bend. Across the state, you can't pretend. This don't poison in the end. Kids with cancer, no cause named. Dust in schools they never claimed. No swab, no test, no agency. Just buried deep bureaucracy. They said too costly to contain, but built a dud dump across the drain. Green up CO2, same report filed. The fish are gone, blame climate change. Atomic corruption, stamped and sealed, they walked away. Still the isotopes don't stray. Bound to air, not bound to say. Atomic corruption, they marked 5 counties in the plan. Laughed at Kentucky's open land. Told us hillbillies won't understand. Technetium track 14 miles. Same as plant, same toxic file. Lawrence Livermore drew the lines, but DOE said never mind. Birth smell form, no press release. No study done, no state police. The river holds what they won't name. Atomic corruption, open air across the fields. Science told them never healed, but profit hides what power shields. Atomic corruption, it don't fade, it won't forgive. Still inside the lives we live. This is not a claim. Atomic corruption, it is.
Let me guess, the volume was off. I drove everybody away. Okay, bye-bye. I smurfed up again. What else is new? Let me restart. How far into the show are we? We're long in, okay. My apologies, I was late. The first couple of minutes are silent. So Conference of Parties refused to acknowledge that Fukushima reactors have melted down. Billions flowed to the U.S. nuclear sector with payoff still years away. That's why I should have the comments up, because you guys were there telling me. Well, we just lost a couple of minutes, was it? Because I took the headphones off before I start speaking. Normally I leave the headphones on so that I know that the volume is actually turned up. It's pretty rare. Once or twice a year I'll do that. My apologies. So 80 million is actually $350 billion rather, is what they plan, just the United States, not counting other countries, plan to spend on nuclear. In theory, 80 billion can buy enough reactors to power all of Virginia's data centers. What do you need all these data centers for? Why, oh, 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 why would you need all that? Did somebody ask for it? Did the population, was there a referendum that we need data centers everywhere, monitoring and digitizing every facet of everybody's life? And what's the point of that? Would anybody actually, was there any big protests in the streets? We need data centers everywhere to track, trace, and database every facet of everybody's lives forever and ever and ever. Right? As soon as the technology becomes available, they weaponize it against humanity. How are we supposed to have a life when they're going to spend $350 billion in data centers? And because the data centers now are consuming so much electricity, the prices have gone up on that too. Right? Because the data centers are stealing your electricity that you paid for. You didn't pay for it, so a corporation come in, demand more nuclear to poison the environment. At the same time, they're used to destroy you and to raise your prices. It's the opposite of any kind of rationale. In reality, traditional reactors take 10 years. Really? You can build a reactor in 10 years? I'd like to see it. While a highly anticipated wave of small modular reactors is yet to produce commercial power. No, to produce any power, not commercial power. You deceptive and deceitful and dishonest creature. There is no small modular reactor producing any kind of power. Canada allegedly is building a small modular reactor. It happens to be 240 feet tall. It's 50 feet taller than the Fukushima reactors, the massive Fukushima reactors. That means the only plants that will go into service anytime soon are a handful of shuttered facilities that can be restarted. In other words, there is no small modular reactors. Artificial intelligence boom has since supercharged electricity consumption, straining the power supplies and driving up prices. If they can't supply their own massive amount of power, they shouldn't be allowed to operate. They've got to pay for it, not us. We don't want it. We didn't ask for it. We don't need it. We don't need AI. We certainly don't need AI driving up our prices and then at the same time use to monitor and tax and try to control everything on the planet. Who are these creatures that think this is a good idea? It's the opposite of any kind of a reasonable idea. Geothermal actually exists, by the way. You don't need nuclear. You don't need to. Why are you wasting all your time trying to solve the small modular reactor of fusion when you actually have geothermal? What is the point of that? Where's the logic in that? Where's the rationale in that? What will it take to harness it? If you took the $350 billion you're going to burn on nuclear, which you know is going to double or triple because it's nuclear, you imagine taking $350 billion and focusing on geothermal? Goodbye gas, oil, and coal and nuclear. And goodbye stupid conference of parties yearly scam. The process emits no pollutants, unlike solar or wind. Well, solar and wind doesn't release pollution, but it's available around the clock. This type of electricity production has actually been around for a long time. Exactly. So Mexico has the potential to produce 163 gigawatts of geothermal. That's only because you're looking at conventional drilling techniques. They can't do the last couple of kilometers. So that's enough to power the homes for 122 million people just on their standards. Based on shitty technology, obsolete. Meaning you don't have to drill as deep to access the really hot rocks, which is the source of the potential geothermal. New company drills 2 vertical wells, 2.8 miles below the surface, and creates a dozen horizontal wells, like tins of forks. To your left there, or to your bottom. And once in place, the wells, the tins of forks can each stretch 1.8 miles. It's geothermal, collects heat and then powers turbines. The system will supply 8.2 megawatts of electricity to the regional grid and 64 megawatts of district heating to a nearby town. So $107 million will provide 72 gigawatts of power, which is $1.5 million per megawatt. Makes nuclear look obsolete, doesn't it? And this is on the worst case scenario. So, like, they don't get any money thrown at them. But when you do, like $107 million, they're able to produce enough $1.5 million per megawatt. It's an insane difference in how expensive nuclear is. So if you look at the nuclear sector, where you want to put $350 billion there in the next 25 years. So $350 billion divided by 1.48 is 236 gigawatts. That's over half of the total nuclear on the planet. That's enough to power say 200 million homes and businesses. But that's using an obsolete technology for geothermal. Dandelion Energy, homeowners can buy access to geothermal per month for $10 to $40 a month. You can't do something like that with nuclear. Nuclear is going to rob everything you have left after the carbon taxes and all the other taxes they got stuck down everybody's throat, because that's the only reason they exist, is to screw society and humanity out of a future. And nuclear is the best way to do it on top of that. Wrote the Conference of Parties 30, UN-regulated carbon market. The risk and opportunities for financial institutions. UN Environment Program. They got an absurd amount of money, and they won't do nothing good with it. You got 195 countries throwing money at UN constantly, every facet of it, all the subsidies of it. UN got so much money, they keep creating these subsidies, and 195 countries are expected to fund that, no matter what it is. Whatever kooky. And so now they created organizations to control almost every facet of everybody's life on the entire planet. At the same time, they promoted nuclear, which is exterminating all the species on the planet through the radioactive fallout. And The Paris goal of 1.5 centimeters. This is madness to suggest that 1.5 centimeters is going to wreak destruction on our entire planet. It's absurd to suggest it. Radiation fallout, on the other hand, has increased the temperatures worldwide by about 7 degrees since Fukushima. And particularly the ocean, now that you killed the essence of the ocean, the soup of life itself, because of Fukushima's pulse event. Carbon markets have shown both promises. Carbon markets, yeah, promises for a lot of money for the crazies. Like, carbon is not your problem. Radioactive fallout is your problem. Carbon doesn't make plumes that covers the planet. Carbon, if they did, carbon plumes still don't pulse energy at the speed of light every second. Almost at the speed of light every second. Fukushima's and the nuclear industry has 1,000 fuel pools producing plumes covering our planet like this. This is the French government's model of Fukushima's radioactive fallout. There we go. We got James calling in. Okay, give me 1 second, James. I got to set up that phone proper because I'm late behind everything tonight for some reason, but we're in good shape. We're almost there.
No, you're doing good.
We're almost there. To everybody. Say hello, everybody. All right, man. I think check the volume. Screwed you up the last time I screwed you up the last time you called in. Go ahead.
I'm sorry for calling. I'm only calling in because we're having quite an emergency right now.
Oh, okay.
And I needed to get this across to you. I've finally been attacked by the nuclear industry. Finally.
Oh, congratulations.
And
sorry, go ahead, James.
You just wouldn't believe what they're so mad about. Like, we've done Meltdown Queen, we've done all these things, and nobody said anything. They just let us play around. But neutron embrittlement, something about a neutron embrittlement just really completely. Like, if you go to my channel and look, there's like over almost 800 views on this. I've been going through a dialogue with this guy named Bob, who's clearly in the industry, and we've been going through this whole thing, and it finally ended with, he was like, well, I don't know what your background is, because I'm like, you have no idea what my background is on nuclear. You have no idea. And so he's like, well, I'm scared to know what your background is and all this other stuff. And it's just been going on and on, because he keeps debating the whole nuclear energy needs external power to operate. And if you lose off-site power, you got to go file a report to the NRC and say what happened and what mitigation efforts you made to make sure it doesn't happen again and all that crap. And it has nothing to do with the generators. The generators are there just in case, worst case. Like, what do you think's happening in Ukraine? So I'm bringing all these points up to him,
wow.
And he's evading it. He's just evading the whole external power thing.
So
finally, he's just
go ahead.
like,
Yeah, keep going.
but he's just like, well, I can't imagine what your background is, so I just replied, my background is years of listening to Dana Durnford and doing my own research through ChatGPT Pro subscription. And so, of course, he replies back like, oh, you're just an Alex Jones person.
Oh, what?
I'm like, just remember, you took the bait. The very first thing he replied was, is this bait? And he goes on and about something, and it goes on from there. So just the foreshadow of, like, whoever this person is. And Colette, bless her heart, she's just, like, trying to comment back to this guy, like, you realize that nuclear is the most expensive, and this guy's going back saying, well, it's only because you anti-nuclear people make it expensive. It's pure gold, Dave.
Wow, that's I got the video up. He's talking about neutron embrittlement video, folks. I might have turned his volume down for a split second to cough.
That's the thing they're mad about the most. They don't care about Fukushima, because I brought that up. I'm like, you're the type of person that hasn't lost a second of sleep on Fukushima. He's like, oh, you can go panthos on me and everything, like,
wow.
Be all emotional and shit. It's like, what? I said, you're the most hideous example of what deserves to be thrown into the ninth circle of hell. And I'm going to get all Panthers, I'll get all Dante on you, whatever. So
It's wonderful.
Like,
that's the way to stick it to them. Keep going, yeah.
This is the face of the nuclear industry fighting at us. These people,
Yeah,
they look at you like you're Alex Jones. They equate you, Dana, as Alex Jones.
Wow.
Don't forget that.
I didn't know that. I've had a lot of, as you know, a lot of nasty stuff said, but we cover nuclear. We do presentations, lectures on nuclear. We're very in depth, and we provide the documentation for all of our assertions. These are not opinions or conjectures, and James doesn't have. I've seen James. Listened to James many times. There isn't. She's totally on facts only. Like every nuclear power plant is dependent upon two external to supply power the entire time. Like try to power 4,500 one-ton gallons of water per minute into a reactor. You're talking about 6 million plus one-ton pickup trucks of water every day. How much power do people think that takes? That's per reactor, folks. And so if a site got 6 reactors, try wrapping your mind around that statement every 24 hours. Right? That's 36 million one-ton pickup trucks of water. You need 2 gas, oil, and coal plants to do that. And that's just the water. That's not the entire. The whole site can't run on its own power. It runs on external power. So what James is telling us. Keep going, James. I'm sorry, but I just want to clarify for everybody.
Well, not only that, but I brought up you care about the thermal. You're all cool about the thermal efficiency factor also, because it all matters about the inlet temperature of that cool water coming in.
Yeah, big time.
If that water's not cool, then you can't get good power out. If it's warm water, you got to set things back. So that's something that's completely independent of nuclear. It's the temperature of the fucking river.
Yes, which is rising all the time. There's no glaciers to feed them and cool them anymore. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, wonderful.
So it's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. If you're for nuclear energy, you're for just destroying the future. And he's like, well, you have the audacity to say that. Like, you don't need to have audacity to say that your vision is reckless. But anyway, I just want to end with that.
It's awesome, man. Loving it.
They're mad about neutron embrittlement. That's their Achilles heel.
It is
they
so.
Don't care about Fukushima.
Yeah, and your link below his video. Go ahead, James. I'll finish after.
But they're scared of neutron embrittlement because they have no solution for that. So that's why they're so freaked out about it.
So we got to start pushing that every show now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, and you got a beautiful link under your video for that stuff. Okay, love you, buddy. Take care, man.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. That was awesome. So neutron embrittlement has switched on the industry. That was too much for him. The truth is just too much. James is after telling the truth. Baby gonna cry. Neutron embrittlement. So most of a nuclear site becomes embrittled from the neutron bombardment. The beta rays, the gamma shines, the alpha emissions are destroying the integrity of everything on the site. And so conventionally, 90+% of everything material on the site was nuclear waste because of neutron bombardments. It becomes radioactive. That is very fragile. And because these reactors are very high pressure reactors, 1,000 to 2,000 pounds per square inch, the last thing you need is the containment to be brittle. And all of them, like the original charters for nuclear plants was 30 years because of that particular facet. And so what they do is when they build a containment, they keep pieces of the metal and store it away somewhere else. And the idea is they can compare it to decades later to the material from the reactor, and they can see the difference. But that was just a cover story to lull you into complacency on top of that. And so Fukushima Reactor 3, and that's James Luce's website now on YouTube. And James has honored me with one of my best pictures, actually. Excuse me. And he has over 450 anti-nuclear songs there. Meltdown Queen is just Like your time an absurd amount of great music. And that was one of his earlier songs, still one of our favorites here. And we don't play it enough, actually. We have played it a lot, but we didn't. He produced so much material, you try to keep up with it, right? And so look at him. He got trolled. He got almost 800 views from the trolls. So reactor embrittlement is your nightmare. Because, like the buildings are pressurized. And when you look at Reactor 3 blow up in Japan, it ejected 8 reactor cores from the fuel pools and the reactor right out of the building because it's very high pressure. And the reactor cores were stored in the pools atop the pressure vessel, so to speak, or right alongside of the vessels. And they're already at 1,000 pounds per square inch. So if they cut off external power, like James was alluding to, then the pressure rises because the generators are not meant to deal with a running reactor. They're meant to deal for the fuel pools and for the cool downs, but they're not meant for a running reactor. So it's very hard for the generators to rein in the power, if it shuts down while the reactors are running, and that's the problem. The external power, you need 6,450,000 one-ton pickup trucks, which is 1,000 liter per one-ton pickup truck, which is what the big one-ton pickup trucks can carry, just to try to give you some visualizing of it. So every reactor is using that 24 hours. So do you really think you're running that on just a small amount of external energy? You need 2 dedicated gas, oil, and coal plants. And if you look at the infrastructures of a nuclear power site, it's massive. And it's not just boiling water, the turbines and everything. You're running on external power. 2 large, full-size gas, oil, and coal plants, and typically coal because it's cheap. And most of the infrastructures, since the nuclear industry existed, was built to accommodate the nuclear industry and reject renewable industry, which was on purpose. And because you can't contain the emissions. And so that's quite interesting. We're going to have to try to remember now to bring that up each show, reactor embrittlement, and the flaws of it. Now, underneath James's video, I was showing you there, neutron embrittlement. There's a PDF file, neutron embrittlement. That's the second video at the top. And that PDF file is almost 500 pages of the neutron embrittlement. And it's not very nice, a very flattering look at the issues with that. And so I downloaded that, and I've been extremely busy the last couple of days, but it sits on my desktop. And I'll read everything in that. But now I'm going to read it for sure. Thanks a lot to the trolls, because now I'm going to go way down that rabbit hole tomorrow and the next day and screen capture all the useful information. And I'll keep that in a file that I use all the time. We appreciate it. That's going to come back and haunt the nuclear industry forever now. Because if that's the problem, that's exactly what we want to hear. Is it time to put a price on carbon? No, it's time to put a tax on the United Nations. The United Nations doesn't pay any taxes. And it's raking in just billions and billions and billions and billions. And everything it spends on it doesn't pay taxes. It's got the sweetest deal on the planet. We need a carbon tax and a tax on them. They have no right to be taxing everybody, and they're not paying any taxes. They're causing the taxes to rise and rise and rise for everybody. Well, they need to be held accountable too. Stressing the need for a clean market signal to drive the transition. The transition, what do you need a carbon tax? You need a nuclear fallout tax. You need a radiation fuel pool emission tax. You want to come up with solutions, that's what you got to do. Carbon is great. There's more birds, more insects, more plants, more trees. And you need to stop trying to saying that carbon is an issue, you pieces of shit, on this planet. James got me all worked up now. I love it. It is time to put a price on carbon, time to put a price on United Nations' deceptive and dishonest and disingenuous history and legacy. There should be war tribunals against what they've done to North Korea, for goodness sakes. UN Secretary, wait, they used to put the Secretary General. McDonald's has, I have a secretary, I'm the Secretary General myself of my company. Every company out there has a Secretary General, but on the UN. UN Secretary General is the only one that matters. And this guy, his history is disgusting on top of that. It's called for the integration of carbon neutrality into all economic and fiscal policies and decisions. And because they call nuclear carbon-free, then nuclear has a cheaper energy portfolio, right? Because even though it's the most carbon resource-intensive industry in human history, is the nuclear industry, everything in the nuclear industry is unbelievably carbon-intensive. Carbon's good. Carbon's what makes the planet work. No carbon, no planet. No carbon, no birds. No carbon, no puppies. No carbon, no pizzas. No carbon, no birds, no insects, no mammals. We look just like the moon. And they're just screeching because they control the media. Carbon's going to come and get you. And anybody says anything different, of course, is ostracized. Establishment of a UN-regulated so they need to hire another, 50,000 people to do that worldwide. How are they going to regulate the whole planet, carbon? Well, they got to hire an absurd amount of people to do it. And then they need endless amount of money to fund their carbon, so all the money they're making will, right? This is absurdness. This organization needs to disappear from our planet. They're insane, right? What they're doing is actually insane. Our land is not for sale. Indigenous people protest at conference of parties, Constipated Party 30. 30 years they haven't produced anything. They sure raised a lot of money. Nobody knows where it went. No agricultural businesses, all exploitations, illegal miners or illegal loggers, the protester says. Well, they chopped out an 8-mile road out of the rainforest so they can have it out in the middle of the rainforest. So to protest logging, they chopped 8 miles of highway out and built an 8-mile road so UN can live out there for a few days. And anybody who wants to go out there and have a pavilion got to spend $500 million or $500,000. United Nations security personnel, you know what they've done to North Korea when they went from League of Nations to United Nations after Nagasaki, Hiroshima. North Korea was occupied by Japan for 50 years. It was a brutal occupation. And they've been brutally occupied and denied now for 70 years on top of the invasion by the United Nations. So 120 years ostracized from society and the planet. Because United Nations had a police action that killed millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans. And they didn't raise a nickel for North Korea. They didn't help North Korea at all, a single time in 70 years. And they ostracized them from the planet, and so they economically depressed them and then used them to demonize them and justify everybody having nuclear weapons worldwide. When you look at the United Nations, they're literally terrorists. United Nations followed security personnel following all established security protocols. So wait a second, United Nations is now the authority? They're now the police department? They have over 12,000 police there. Why didn't they deal with it? Why would United Nations security? How do they get the authority to do anything on the planet when they're just a corporation? Right? They have no authority. They're not a regulatory agencies. I think it's quite interesting. Time to defeat climate change deniers. Lula. You got any idea how corrupt this guy is? The president of Brazil is probably one of the most corrupt people on the planet. Literally a dictator. Time to defeat the climate change deniers. Well, we don't deny climate change. It's 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry. 80 years from all the bombing, all the dumps, 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging radiation into the atmosphere, splitting atoms every second. In fact, we got a poll here tonight, don't we? I forgot to bring it up. Should Conference of Parties 30 include 80 years of nuclear fallout, the nuclear tests, the ocean dumpings, the 1,000 nuclear fuel pools worldwide, splitting atoms directly into the environment from thousands of reactor cores? When you take a reactor core out of the reactor, it's still splitting atoms, and there's no containment anymore. Not that the reactor is 100% containment. Brazilian president urged the world to fight the spread of misinformation, which is what the United Nations is spreading, is misinformation. Carbon doesn't heat up a planet. Radioactive fallout did. We have 80 years of radioactive fallout. And we're talking massive radioactive fallout just from the nuclear testings. Carbon didn't do this to the oceans. Radiation did. Excuse me. So embrittlement has enraged the nuclear industry. Well, that's going to come back and haunt them forever and ever and ever now. This is a plume in the ocean, covering the entire ocean. That was 2013 model from a German institution, which is a very flawed model, because plutonium, after 20 days, Neptunium-239 decays to plutonium in 2.5 days. So plutonium, that's plutonium. After 25 days, all of it turns to plutonium. That's a 20-day model of the radioactive fallout. So it covers all the fresh water, all the ocean right away. And this radioactive fallout will cause embrittlement of everything on the planet. Airplane windows, tires on your cars, your buildings. It destroys the infrastructure, the radioactive fallout do, because from the Bromson lung effect. Just give me a second here. I got no way of turning this off my screen here. Let me figure this out. One minute. So this carbon doesn't make plumes covering the planet, and even if you did, the plumes wouldn't pulse energy at the speed of light. Imagine a snowstorm covering your planet. That's what you're looking at. But it's radiation. That's a radiation plume from Fukushima, based on TEPCO's tiny, tiny numbers. And that the numbers from Fukushima didn't include, what you're looking at there does not include the emissions from these buildings, Reactor 3 and 4. Reactor 4 and Reactor 3 of Fukushima. World's fossil fuel obsession threatens billions of lives. Amnesty International, who's bum buddies with the nuclear industry and with the United Nations, which is the nuclear industry. One of the biggest lobbyists on the planet is UNSCLEAR, IRPA, the IPRC, International Atomic Energy Agency, happens to be all United Nations little pit bulls that are out there chewing up our planet. No new fossil fuels, really. How about no nuclear? Fossil fuels didn't do this. This is radioactive fallout done that. So you find these kids, the kids will make signs, or they'll give them signs, then they'll take pictures, and it looks like the kids. The kids want whatever United Nations wants. United Nations needs to go. They're your enemy. This is the enemy of all species and humanity. It's not opinions, right? It's not a conjecture. That's the facts. You really think that's not an issue? That's 2013 from Fukushima. But the reality of it was we covered the whole planet in less than 30 days with brutal pulse event of radioactive fallout. That's never going to go away. We got 80 years of emissions that are never going to go away. Everything we've ever created is out there pulsing energy at the speed of light every second from the nuclear industry. All the nuclear bombs, the hideous, the unconscionable, the monstrous dumping that they've done in all the oceans, the nuclear industry. Like, for instance, France says they're going to go out and recover from one spot alone 200,000 barrels of nuclear waste. Well, the barrels, when they sink, they're under pressure. The bottom and top are crimped down, so they let go right away. You can't recover that. Russia and the Soviet Union, also the former Soviet Union, and Russia have 18,000 nuclear dumps in the Arctic. The United States have 1 million square kilometers of the Marshall Islands that is uninhabitable because of radioactive fallout. 1 million square kilometers of the ocean and everything is still incredibly radioactive. What the French done to the Polynesian islands was equal to a Nagasaki bomb a week for 12 years. What the British done to Christmas Island, the archipelagos, the tropical paradises, the French Polynesians, Christmas Island, Marilinga, Montebello's, the Marshall Islands. They took all the tropical paradises and they didn't just evaporate them, they destroyed them and contaminated. And these were all the nurseries. The British spent 30 years taking 45-gallon drums out and throwing them off freighters that they built specifically to do that all day, every day. Just driving around on the continental shelf, dumping 45-gallon drums. And again, you know, every 33 feet is 14.6 pounds per square inch atmospheric pressure. These barrels are just crimped on the bottom, crimped on the top. They're not sealed on the bottom. They're not like welded in bottom, welded in top. They're crimped on. So when they sink, by the time they get down to 100 feet, of course, they're going to cave in. And you're going to lose the top and the bottom, or both. And then you're going to lose that inventory before it even gets on the ocean floor. It's monstrous. Every nuclear power plant has incinerators that are legally allowed to burn certain amount of radiation, and every nuclear power plant on the planet has pipes going straight out to the ocean where they're legally, because no one's allowed to question nuclear industry. The checks and balances like UN are not checks and balances. You know, what Hanford done is unconscionable. What all the national laboratories in the United States have done is unconscionable. And they're on the biggest aquifers, all of them, which are poisoned from radiation and are feeding tens of thousands of farms. Those aquifers, radioactive water. The radioactive, like if you closed every nuclear power plant, you have 1,000 fuel pools out there full of decades of reactor cores. And so say there's 8 reactor cores in a fuel pool. That's 8 million homes and businesses of atoms being split every day and released into the environment, up tall, skinny stacks. None of this goes away. None of this went away. We've got 80 years of emissions. So why are we talking about carbon? Because they don't want you talking about nuclear. Climate change is in the news during, of course they are, they own the media. Like, for them to be able to cover up this, they have to be able, the only way they can guarantee it can work is if they own that media. They have to own all the media. They have to, because they can't stand up to any scrutiny. I'm going to play this clip. I've been playing it for years. I made this like 12 years ago, or 11 years ago, I can't remember. Somewhere in the first couple of years.
What I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4.
So this is just a fraction of the media. That's BBC Rupert. That's the biggest in Europe. CBS is the biggest in North America. ABC Australia is the biggest on that continent. CNN, of course, is everywhere. That's just a fraction of the media that are pretending they're on top of a building that don't exist. Do you really think they're doing that because it had no adverse side effects?
This building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So how many people think that any of these people are actually at the top of that building to your left? Nobody, right? But in order for that law to work, they need to be able to control all the media. Because if a media came out and started targeting and say, hey, have you done what I've done there? You won't find this video anywhere else in this kind of format. Why do you think they're doing that? It's because everything I'm telling you is true. This is an educational program. I can't run an educational program by lying, like they do, by the way. I do it by telling the truth and providing documentations for my assertions. Amnesty International said in a new report urging world leaders to halt the obsession with energy sources that fuel climate crisis, which is radiation fallout. Radiation is what's fueling the climate crisis, for goodness sakes. How could it be anything else? So like I showed you that cesium model from the French government earlier. That was 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. Cesium-137, by the way, pulses energy 600 feet every second for 300 years. So all the cesium we ever produce is out there pulsing energy at the speed of light 600 feet. So think of the emissions. I need to do that, actually. Hang on a second. Let me explain why I'm saying, in the context of what I'm saying. Because we're not doing this because we haven't got something better to do, because we cover nuclear. Nuclear is your issue, and that's why I cover it exclusively. So this is Japan, based on the French government, of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. So this is almost day 20 right there. That's day 20 of radioactive fallout. So, but it's not just cesium, right? It's all the other. And let me explain the Bromson lung effect, what I mean by that. I'll do a quick and dirty version for you. The whole story is crazy that we're still talking this way. We still have to explain it. Okay, so this is cesium-137. This is a 31-day model. The whole planet is buried in cesium-137. The whole planet was also buried in xenon-133 and 135. The whole planet was also buried in iodine-131, and for every iodine-131, there's 10 times more 132, and 30 times more 133, and 31 times more iodine-129, with a 50 million year half-life. I'll make my point. Hey, wait, bear with me. They even acknowledged it as a catastrophe for every victim on the planet, every species on the planet. 500 trillion atoms a kilogram. So a BQ is a becquerel. That's the pulse of energy in every direction each second from an atom. So in order to have a becquerel, you got to have an atom, right? So these plumes are covering our planet in less than 20 to 30 days. 450,000 of xenon-133, you can expect just as much 135 xenon. And you would expect similar amounts of krypton-85, for instance. And so think of 30 days. So you got cesium-137, you got xenon-133, iodine-121, 131, 132, 133. And the 132, 133 are 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of all the species and humans than the incredibly effective 131 is. But think, bear with me. I showed you plutonium plume earlier. Just let me drag that in there real quick. Because I'm going to make a point for you that I hope, well, I know if you're paying attention, we'll bring it all together for you. So this is the neptunium-239, which decays to plutonium-239 after 2.5 days. By the way, this is a plutonium-239, which is named after the devil for obvious reasons. You can guarantee 3 tumors. And most people will die from a skeleton tumor, a bone tumor. Okay, so these types of isotopes, when they're in the bodies, like we're talking about so much of the different isotopes, there's a lot to take in. So it takes a few minutes to flush it out for you. So when you see all of these different isotopes, and of course, you know, iodine's 131, 132, 133, and 129 is also aggregated in the thyroid and your heart. So you got gammas, for instance, and you got betas and alphas. And what happens is you got the thyroids and the stem cells of every human and every species producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells forever post-Fukushima. Well, post-nuclear industry, but Fukushima was a pulse event, right? There was around 36 reactor cores lost. A model's only 20 days, don't forget that. Okay, but the other problem with this is you got the betas and the alphas, the neutrons and everything else. You got all these different isotopes. So what happens now with, you got gammas and neutrons and betas and alphas. They pulse energy, some of them up to 600 feet every second for 300 years, like the cesium-137. And what happens is neutrons and betas, gammas and alphas cannot mingle with they can't interlace each other. So they don't pass through each other. And what happens is they're both pulsing, all 4 of them, the gammas, neutrons, betas, and alphas, are pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. Each of them. And so when they hit each other, they change direction. That's known as a Bremsenlung, a German word, and I probably butchered it. But we call it an X-ray. So because you have evidence, right, the incontestable evidence of, say, the cesium, and we're talking massive amounts. This is a hideous amount on its own. But so in that same plume that covers the entire planet, we have confirmations of at least 20 different isotopes. Now you can extrapolate mathematically the other isotopes with just a single isotope. For instance, like Iodine, 131, you can extrapolate 132, 133 ratios, and of course the 129 ratio. And 129 never goes away. These are absurd numbers per liter. These are absurd numbers. But that same liter would have had all of these other isotopes into it. So you're talking about gammas, neutrons, betas, alphas, and X-rays. So every species is getting full-body X-rays. And these plumes never go away. They're pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. So what do you think is causing climate change, per se? It has to be the radioactive fallout from 80 years of relentless emissions. From 1,000 fuel pools on top of that worldwide are splitting atoms directly into the environment. They have no way of flushing or containing this. All the atoms are the same size. You don't contain everything. Everything has to get up because they're all the same size. And so what's at the surface of all the waters and fresh and salt worldwide is phytoplankton. So they're going to be the first affected. And they're the bases of the food chain, the bases of the oxygen chain, the bases of the carbon sequestering chain. And if you affect the very bases of all of those, over 80 years you end up with climate change. And climate change works this way. The radioactive fallout, the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the alphas, the X-rays are in your forests and meadows, and they wipe out the bacteria and the fungus, which your biota is dependent upon. And so the biota breaks down the foliage and the litter. You know, the dead creatures in the forests and the meadows and everywhere else, your land mass. And so when you start attacking that, and that's what they've been doing for 80 years, but Fukushima was a major pulse event. We're 14 years down the road, headed for 15, believe it or not. Surreal to say that out loud, actually. We've been at it this entire time. And so what it does is it breaks down, your foliage and your litter doesn't break down anymore because you wiped out the majority of the bacteria and the fungus. So what we were talking about way back in the day when Fukushima happened was we would expect to see forest fires go crazy, and we would expect to see flash floods worldwide because the radiation fallout was worldwide. And so how that works is you wipe out the bacteria and the fungus, it wipes out by proxy the biota with the millions of microscopic creatures that break down the litter and the foliage in the forests and the meadows. But the bacteria, the fungus, and the biota, and the breaking down of the foliage and the litter is what retained water, and that went deep into the earth. That whole ecosystem goes very deep down into the earth, multiple meters. And so water was retained into the earth because you had this ecosystem of microscopic creatures and bacteria and fungus, and all your roots and everything were dependent upon bacteria and fungus and the biota too, right? Because they would break down all the other stuff, and that would be nutrients for the plants and the trees and the fruit and the fields and everything else like that. So what we're seeing now, unfortunately, is the results of that is the earth is not soaking water up anymore. And what happens, of course, is instead of water getting soaked, heavy rains, water getting soaked up into a so-called parched earth because of a drought. And droughts were usually fed by the glaciers, which are also missing post-Fukushima. Right, our research expeditions for 6 years to Alaska doing species counts for 4 to 5 months a year. And it was a very humble thing, so I had to stay on the ocean, and I had to do it by myself because we couldn't afford to fund the whole operation. It was very difficult times, and they still are. And so now the earth doesn't soak up water. So when you have rain, you're guaranteed flash floods. When you have lightning strikes, you're guaranteed forest fires, massive, uncontainable ones, because the foliage and the litter hasn't broken down for years. So when you get lightning strikes, you have these big chunks of tinder dry foliage and litter because the earth is soaking up heat instead of water post-Fukushima. That's the reality. It's the embrittlement, the neutron embrittlement of our ecosystem. So neutron embrittlement doesn't just take place in a reactor; it takes place in your ecosystem, because the neutrons and the betas, the alphas, the gammas, the X-rays never go away. So every species is being sterilized on top of that by the full body X-rays, and so are the humans. Now you can deny what I'm telling you because you're not willing to do the research, but if you look into what I'm talking about, you're going to find out that I'm completely honest and sincere and genuine. It's an educational program. Again, let me remind you that this is cesium-137 only. This is 10 million atoms. This is the French government. This was on a study on a spike. This is not a projection. This is not an opinion or a conjecture. This is an absolute, unassailable fact. Hello, everybody. Climate change is in the news during Conference of Parties 30. And I explained to you why that was, because in order for them to cover up the nuclear and then claim nuclear is the solution, when it's the issue, the only way nuclear industry can exist, the only way the nuclear industry can exist, that picture will get better because it's a video. And just remember, I made this 11 years ago. We didn't have really high quality back in those days, right? I made this 11 years ago. The evidence, and I bring you the quick and dirty evidence, so to speak, right? Because for the new viewers, and you want to reinforce as much facts. And when I'm saying quick and dirty, that's the best of the best facts. Not all the time, of course, right? But it visually tells you the story. So, like, if I want to go, like, next year, I'm going to go down to wherever they're holding Conference of Parties 31. I'm going to be there. And I'm going to be there with big placards like this. I'm going to be there with big placards like that. I'm going to be there with big placards like this, pass out to everybody. And I'm going to be there with placards of this. And we're going to have projectors playing this with audios. And then we're going to be holding questions and answers and getting all of those people to publish their on their phone, their videos to their sites. We're going to stomp this nuclear industry into submission. I have been at this for a very long time, and we need to bring the fight to them. And I guarantee you they're going to bring it to me because I said that, but I am not afraid. I don't hide like a coward. They can't challenge me publicly. And I've educated enough people now, no matter, even if they do get rid of me, they still can't stop the truth. They'll just if they turn me into a so-called martyr, we should wish we were so lucky. Amnesty International is nobody's friend, except for United Nations, of course. China eased its Japanese seafood ban. No, they didn't. It was just on scallops from Akito. Right? They're still banning the food from 10 Japanese prefectures, including Tokyo. Tokyo. The food still banned, but the media's out there screeching. China's eased the Japanese seafood ban, when in reality, it was just scallops, and it's from Akito. It's from Hokkaido, the most northerly island in Japan, rather. I can't even remember sometimes. And it's just for a small amount. But all the media's out there, it's safe to eat. Your media is your issue, right, by doing that. Never holding the industry accountable now has led us to a dark time in humanity's history. We're on the precipice of a major extinction event. He picked up 30 million one-ton bags. 30 million one-ton bags. Can you wrap your mind around that statement? Now they're dumping it in farmers' fields and growing food in it. Because there's no opposition. There's no reason for them not to. Because there's no one, only me and a handful of people at best, on a good day, trying to have a conversation about this. So what I done was I launched research expeditions for 6 years. And the species to your left now are exterminated. And I went from Vancouver, British Columbia for 6 years. And the reason I went back for 5 more years, there's 27,000 islands, is because the species to the left are gone. And so I went back because the ocean is a soup of life. In a glass of water is 1 billion creatures. And the species now are gone. So I had to go back for 5 more years to see if the species to your left recovered. And as you can see to the right, they didn't. I was I'm an ex-commercial diver. I have around 14,000 hours on the ocean floor. And so I know a few things. And we didn't go out blindfolded. We went out with the knowledge of what has taken place. And so your species are gone. That can't be just British Columbia to Alaska. Radiation levels on the United States West Coast spiked to 1 million times normal. Spiked. The second line in the center, spiked. So this is a study of 1 million to 10 million times what it was pre-Fukushima of just cesium-137. That's the French government. And I'm going to zoom forward to you. That's over 30 days. That's 20 days right there of radioactive fallout. This is absurd numbers. So I launched emergency research expeditions, and we grinded it out 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean. I still don't have a working outboard motor for my research boat. I've been ostracized. And everything you see in here, I put in there with green screen because it's all wiped out. I spent 6 years doing research expeditions. Me and my incredible sidekick, Zoe, who I just miss so much. Never left my side for 15 years. She would run up the pontoon and do a face plant on every beach. Like, I've hit this every way you can imagine. You can't even... The average person has no concept of how much research I actually done. We gave it our heart, our soul, 4 to 5 months a year. Four to 5 months a year. And now, post-Fukushima, because we proved the food chain is broken, but now it's even worse. This was a few days ago. There's a humpback whale, a 2-year-old humpback whale, starved to death. It takes about a year and a half to become that emaciated, by the way. All the whales the bride whales we're finding are incredibly emaciated. That was considered incredibly emaciated. This was 2 weeks ago. He was alive when he came ashore. We're seeing the orcas showing up emaciated. You can see their rib cages. And they admit they starved it, but you can tell when you see the tail, right? And Belgium, you've seen it again, right? Like a deflated balloon or something, but it's actually an orca that eats up to 240 species. That's from radioactive fallout. To see that creature come ashore, he was alive when he came ashore. And conveniently, they only released that one picture, very grainy picture. Imagine if that was high quality. Imagine if that was high quality like that picture. All the gray whales are emaciated. They're not concerned. They're concerned about ship strikes. But ship strikes each year since 2007 has been about 1,200. There's over 7,000 humpback whales starved to death. The heat wave is the radioactive plume I showed you earlier. 70 emaciated gray whales. Well, all the gray whales are now emaciated. All of them. It's absurd. You had 26 killer whales wash ashore, and it only had 6 media's report, and that's the most that have ever came ashore and died, and you only got 6 media reports on it. The first two, though, that was 2 weeks earlier. You can see the shoulder blade, the peanut head, the rib cage is starting to stick up. That's an emaciated whale. And so it's kind of, you can understand why you barely got, this is what you consider a close-up picture. We never got 26 pictures. We got 6 maybe, and most of them were useless. But the original pictures that showed up 2 weeks before that, because they all washed up at the same time, but they didn't find them for 2 weeks, or they wouldn't acknowledge them for 2 weeks. So after 2 weeks, they were still here. Really. How come we haven't got 26 high-definition pictures of them, I wonder? Because a couple of pictures are like this. You can't, and they were very low quality. You couldn't glean anything from that. But you're able to tell from the tail of one of them that this is clearly emaciation. No predators ate them for 2 weeks. That's pretty interesting. Yet when an orca calf in British Columbia came ashore, there was 13 stories right away in the first couple of days. But 26 whales wash up and they only get 6 reports. Wow. And we only get crappy pictures. That's pretty convenient. Let me get down here to where we left off. Be right there. Just bear with me. Oh. Right there, right? What I do sometimes in my sessions here is I'll delete what I've already done because I probably got 70, 80,000 of these screen captures preloaded into my sessions, into my panes. So I can access certain facets of this conversation quickly at high quality, typically. Graduates return to sing school song at campus in Fukushima. This is a story about 2015, where students were coming back into a nuclear wasteland a few miles away from ongoing nuclear meltdowns in Tomoka. Right, and I think the scale is behind me. Let me get it away for 1 second. So that's a 2-mile scale from Tomoka to Fukushima nuclear meltdown. The radiation covered our whole planet. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags across the Fukushima prefecture. The food was banned by 55 countries and 14 prefectures. That's half the country. So the school's been abandoned since Fukushima, but they're bringing students back there every year or every month to sing their Alma song in a nuclear wasteland to try to breathe some life back into it. It shows you how demented and sadistic and twisted the nuclear industry actually is. It allows that. This gentleman, 73, traveled to the venue from Koriyama. Koriyama is a nuclear wasteland. It's a brutal one, too. They didn't evacuate it, of course. You know, he traveled to Koriyama, and let me show what the nuclear industry done. This is unclear, UN, no-go zones, but they say that it's safe there. Let me show you what the communities they left behind. This was a 2011 report. So to your left is the community, the furthest one, and the population, and here, the density of cesium-137 per square meter of soil. This is batshit crazy. So this line here, the next one number is the population of those communities, and then the communities over there. But yet they're like, these are absurd. They're talking about absorbed doses. They got 0.01, like 39,000 atoms pulsing energy every second per square meter. You're breathing it in, you're consuming it. You're talking about enormous amounts of isotopes trapped in your body. Every isotope is pulsing energy at the speed of light. For every species, too. It's killing all their cells and chromosomes and DNA, their molecules are all being damaged. So your body has to repair that every second. Every pulse of energy, your body sends out a massive amount of white blood cells to try to repair the damage and has to attack the source. The source explodes in every direction. So as you're in that environment, you're bioaccumulating it, you're producing more white blood cells. Every white blood cell you produce is one less red blood cell that carries oxygen nutrition. So these communities that are abandoned, and they're clearly nuclear wastelands, and they're only acknowledging cesium-137 as if, as I showed you earlier, cesium-137 comes with all the other isotopes. Koriyama City, 341,000 people, 162,000 becquerels, pulses of energy at the speed of light, of cesium-137, which is pulsing 600 feet every second, in Koriyama City. It's kind of an important story, actually. So let's give it a little bit of prominence it deserves. Just talk about Koriyama City for a minute. Let me show you how batshit crazy that actually is. And my mouse is not working. Oh, I gotta use the other mouse. Hang on. One of my USB ports is damaged, and so I plugged in a USB port into the single one that's working, and I can plug everything else into that. But sometimes that gives me a problem. We'll get there. Takes a few more tries right here, but we'll get it. You'll love this. There we go. I mean, it's really shocking, really. Oh, there it is, actually. Here we go. So Koriyama City, 341,000 people, 162,000 atoms of cesium-137 per square meter in the community. So you just can't have cesium. Plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, uranium, blah, 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 right? Okay, so Koriyama City, this story, elementary school in Japan is using water bottles to shield the students. This is in Koriyama City. This shows you how insane the nuclear industry actually is, how heartless and soulless they actually are, how worthless they really truly are. So a elementary school in Koriyama City, 34 miles west of the nuclear meltdowns, is using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the courtyard and other areas around the school buildings. So you can see the depictions up there, right? Is using water bottles. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside of square boxes which are stacked around the classroom. Because when you talk about millisievers and microsievers, this is why they're doing that, because they don't appreciate the difference. Right? The millisievers and microsievers is meant to hide the fact of Becquerels, atomic decays, physical atoms. Right? So filling the bottles up is for energy. It's not for, you're still going to be breathing it. You're still going to be, every time you touch something, you're still going to be lifting it back up into the environment. The millisievers and microsievers are caused by radioactive fallout. The fallout is airborne. So the kids, which are closer to the ground where that stuff hangs out on top of that, are breathing more in. I'll show you how heartless this actually is, though. Is using water bottles to shield the radiation from the courtyards. This is crazy. Kids, you got to bring water bottles to school. So we can instead of moving the kids out of there, according to the teachers, it seems to reduce the radiation levels inside by 1/3. This is the most insane assertions imaginable. Now remember, Koriyama is surrounded by millions of one-ton bags of radioactive fallout. They picked up in that area. Right, so suggesting that water bottles is going to stop you from breathing in the radiation is insane. That's insane. It's insane. Oh, look at this. Wow, what's this? Should conference of parties include 80 years of nuclear fallout, nuclear tests, ocean dumping, 1,000 fuel pools, the nuclear meltdowns, etc., etc., etc.? I explained that earlier in the video, by the way. Hopefully I've done a pretty good job of it. I provided you with the evidence. We got 44% saying no. Ooh, we got another touchy subject. So neutron embrittlement and nuclear fallout from nuclear testing, ocean dumping, the fuel pools, the meltdowns. Very touchy subjects to the lunatic, crazy nuclear industry. I got 45 votes, but I only got 21 people on my show. So we're being spammed, same as poor James is being spammed on his video. Poor James, he's been ignored for all this time, and now he's under siege all of a sudden. He's going from one extreme to the other. Like, what the hell? And he's what he's saying is right. His songs is telling a story about the harmful effects of nuclear. That's pretty rich, man. I got 45 votes, and 21 people on my show. Residents of Koriyama have been concerned about the high amount of radioactive material which has been found around their town. Yeah, I think that's an understatement, high amounts of radioactive material. Not only that, they're growing food. They're right alongside the one-ton bags of radioactive fallout, shipping it to your country. And you know they're growing it for sale because they're not wearing their idiot paper suit. Koriyama City. Right, in Koriyama City, average disposition is 162,000 counts per square meter of cesium-137. Like I showed you earlier, you can't just have, and I showed you the other isotopes. If you got cesium-137, which is brutal, by the way, you got every other isotope, every nasty thing you can imagine. So for United Nations, UNSCLEAR, to only include cesium-137 is unbelievable, and so they can deny them any ability to get the children out of the nuclear wasteland is evidence beyond imagination they shouldn't exist. Elementary and school is using water bottles, which is the most absurd thing to use from radiation shielding in a nuclear wasteland. Because they've been lied to so much, they believe somehow magically that that is an appropriate response. Have you concerned with the high amounts of radioactive material which have been found around our town? And while school lunches are tested for radiation, parents are concerned because they're largely unable to find out where the items were originally produced. Well, we know for a fact they're feeding the school children radiation from the nuclear wasteland. We know that for a fact. Let me show you how wacky they are to the children. Just give you some. Let me try to give you some insight on that. Take a second. There we go. This is just obviously a fraction of what I can bring to the table, but 45 microsieverts an hour near the school, 90 times higher than Chernobyl. Did they evacuate them? No. Government's answer to the children from radiation fallout is wear long sleeve shirts and shut up. Use water bottles. This is absurdness. This is literally monsters. What they're doing to people on this planet is the most monstrous. Radioactive rain caused 130 schools in Korea, but Japan was fine, was it? Human embryos, United States, likely bioaccumulating radioactive iodine, cesium, strontium, uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium. Japan's safety standards and radiation levels for children are unconscionable. Professor, Fukushima consequences are unlimited in space, time, and social dimension. It doesn't have a limit. It's absurd that a few buildings would have that particular attribute, isn't it? Reactor 3 blowing up. When they looked at that, nuclear scientists looked at 3 and 4, they knew they were gone. The fuel pools were gone, 9 reactor cores in each building were gone, and they chose to cover it up. They chose to hide, and the United Nations led that charge. Tokyo samples had radioactivity levels higher than in Chernobyl. The United Nations says it's the cure to everything. Toothaches, pimples. Geiger counter nearly off the scale near play equipment. Topsoil has already been replaced. Like when the Geiger, if you're going to replace topsoil at a nursery school from radioactive fallout, you leave that community forever. You don't stay there. That's the United Nations allowed that to happen. UNSCLEAR, IRPA, the IPRC, International Atomic Energy Agency, United Nations. They're all United Nations, so United Nations. 27,000 atoms of cesium in a kindergarten near the west coast of Japan, 200 kilometers from the meltdown. Oh, just line your school with bottles of water, that'll shield the children. Well, should we move the kids out of here? No. United Nations says it's okay. United Nations has spent their entire legacy destroying you. They're the enemy of humanity. Universities' radiation tests finds 56.9 microsieverts an hour at elementary schools, drains. This is absurd numbers. Because Koriyama City is outside the evacuation zone because Unclear and ERPA refuse to acknowledge any kind of danger, despite the fact that they acknowledge the danger by just showing you those numbers. They only include cesium-137, which is still brutal. It's a hateful, despicable, sadistic, maniacal, twisted, dangerous, sadistic. Did I mention sadistic? When you look at all the communities they abandoned and said, no, get sick and die, because that's what they done. And that's what happened. I'll just give you an example of that. Wherever the evidence is, that's where we go. We go for the evidence. We deal with the evidence. Like the amount of cancers in the first year, like there was a single street in Fukushima City where 7 people dropped dead in 1 year walking down the road. The number of cancer patients rose by an extra 865,000 cancer victims in 2012. And you got to appreciate the fact that not everybody had health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. Not everybody survived. And you've seen the same statistics worldwide. So let's back to that story about the students going to their alma mater once a month that they abandoned after Fukushima. This is 2015. The story came out yesterday or today, talking about these students go there every month and sing the school song in a nuclear wasteland. The chance to see their classmates in a nuclear wasteland is not worth it. She said, I can't believe we've been doing this for 10 years. Well, you don't really appreciate how evil the nuclear industry actually is, do you? The school is now deserted and pieces are beginning to fall off the outer walls. The floor is beginning to rot from rainwater and radioactive mushrooms are growing in there. But I'll continue going there to sing the song as long as I live because she's a perfect, useful idiot, unfortunately. A perfect victim, I should say, for the nuclear industry, who believed the lies and then therefore went into the nuclear wasteland. Their 10th anniversary was this year, October 19th. Taking the children within 5 miles of ongoing nuclear meltdowns, singing a song. Most evacuees still feel Fukushima plant poses a danger, but yet they're so lulled into complacency. Like that school in Koriyama putting bottles around the inside-outside walls of the classroom rather than evacuating the students, which is, the common sense you would hope. But the nuclear industry, through SpongeBob and The Simpsons and Spider-Man and the Hulk and all their other ideologies they put together, their heroes for the children to lull them into complacency, has worked very well. The United Nations out there promoting nuclear, despite the fact that we have the same gigawatts or less now than we had in 1996 or 1990s, the early 1990s. Fukushima. So he's gone back in the Fukushima. His dilapidated house in February, the floor squeaked, dust rose up, and dust. This is radiation. This is catastrophic stuff to be breathing in. See that mass there? That's 900. The holes in that are 900 times larger than the dust. So he's going to breathe in everything. So his body is producing absurd amount of white blood cells for the rest of his life. Right? He has a declining health because of that. Now he's going back in there regularly because the industry has manipulated and deceived him. That the United Nations has failed him in every step. The United Nations has failed humanity in everything they've ever done in the last 80 years. And the history before that is the League of Nations. They've failed us in everything, and it was on purpose. Now what? They're going to want to carbon tax everybody on the planet. They want to. UN. Your unofficial gods, your unofficial overlords are in a position of enormous power and influence. They have 195 militaries at their beck and call because they're really good at, for 80 years, of buying off your government and infiltrating your government and putting their little useful idiots in key positions of authority and for the monetary and the universities and the medias. He and his family hurriedly vacated their residence following the crisis at Fukushima. So why would you go back? Nobody else went back. Why did you go back? And why did the media, instead of telling this person it's a danger, put him on a pedestal? I'm just asking. Because the industry is unbelievably evil. Its entire ideology, its entire legacy is predicated upon evil. These are freaks, is the best way to describe these people. The primary reason evacuees chose not to return to their hometowns is not because the disaster yet to be contained, it's because the radioactive fallout has destroyed everything it touches forever. And so a journalist is just another word for scumbag. Got a special permit to go to the nuclear wasteland. Still covered by the evacuation order. He rents an apartment in the Koriyama nuclear wasteland. And because the media feeds them so much propaganda, they don't have another narrative. None of them will ever be able to hear your narrative you're listening to tonight. My narrative is not allowed to exist. And look at the stomping they gave me on the poll. Why wouldn't COP30 include 80 years of nuclear fallout? Why? Why wouldn't you want to include that? And nuclear tests and ocean dumping and 1,000 fuel pools hemorrhaging into the environment, the nuclear meltdowns. Why wouldn't you want to include that? Why shouldn't that be part of the equation? Because nuclear looks evil immediately when you start appreciating the enormity of what is actually done and continues to do. The ban on Fukushima is scheduled to be lifted. If your gas plant breaks down, do you have to ban in that part of your country? If your coal plant breaks down, do all the communities run away in terror? Do you put 100 massive sirens within 10 miles of your gas plants, your oil plants, your coal plants? No. Another reason you're doing it in the first place is because of 3 Mile Island as a concession, rather than close down the industry, which clearly, like, people ran to 3 Mile Island because they didn't know what a nuclear meltdown. They wanted to go see a spectacle, right? You can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. But people ran there because they didn't have any concept. They don't run there anymore. But 3 Mile Island, people were so complacent, you'll find the pictures of people out there gathered up at 3 Mile Island trying to figure out what a nuclear meltdown looks like. And the people that did finally run away after Dick Thornburg finally let them 3 days too late, when they came back, their pets were blind or dead that they left behind. And they still went in those houses and continued to live there because they don't know what nuclear is. Well, it killed the pets, but it's okay now, honey. Just dust off that dusty-looking counter there. I'm going to take the kids and go down to McRotten's for part of the town. You can't just... You're right alongside of ongoing nuclear meltdowns, for goodness sakes. You're in a place that's been abandoned for 14 years. And you open up sections because you need a spot for the homeless and the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, close to the nuclear meltdown so they can get to work early in the morning, because nuclear scientists are not going there. Nuclear academics are not going there. for part of the town. 80% of the town is off limits. You can't cross the street because it's a nuclear wasteland. Well, guess what? You're in a nuclear wasteland. Nuclear is not like rocks where it just sits there. It's airborne. It's not going to respect any artificial border you allegedly create. You draw a line and say, well, it's safe here, but it's not safe there on the other side of the line. It just shows you how dumbed down our entire planet actually is. How uncompromisingly the entire planet is compromised. That don't even make sense, I'm pretty sure. Because it's absurd that people don't understand the very basics of radiation, because they don't. When you're lining your classrooms and outside the classroom, inside the classroom with water bottles to protect the kids from radioactive fallout, you're in a different world of stupid. You're in your own little world of stupid created by United Nations. And UNSCLEAR and IRPA and the IPRC and the rest of the bizarre, stupid idiots. These are monsters, literally monsters, to promote nuclear in any sense or shape or form. The fuel, once you take full fuel out of the reactor core and put it in a fuel pool, it's splitting atoms into your community. Forever and ever and ever at a rate the average person has no ability to comprehend. 80% of the town, however, will continue to fall under the ban. So the other 20% can't possibly be safe. You're within eyesight of ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns, for goodness sakes. The central government has not even formulated plans for the decontamination. Formulated plans. You can't decontaminate a community. You can't decontaminate a sidewalk or a playground or your car or your drinking supply or your trees or your roads or anything. You can't decontaminate it. Everything should be dug up under the original protocols of radiation. You would dig up the entire community and put it in a nuclear dump for 1 million years. The central government has not even formulated plans for decontamination of the rest of Fukushima. Now, there's an interesting reason why they haven't done that. Let me explain that to you. I have a unique way of explaining things sometimes. I hope I do anyway. I feel that I do. I don't see anybody else doing it, so I feel that what I do is different. They actually know everything about radiation. That's why they can't decontaminate it, because they know that it infiltrates and radiates and ionizes and destroys everything. They know radiation. They studied everything on the planet, every species, every creature, all the biota, all the plants, all the insects, all the birds, all the mammals, all the animals, absurd amount of times each. And radiation destroys everything. They know it. They know everything about radioactive fallout. There's nothing they don't know about the damage from radiation. There is nothing that they don't know about radiation. They have, if you go look up studies on radiation, on species, you're going to be overwhelmed with millions and millions of studies. They studied man-made anthropogenic radiation more than the natural elements from the solar system. We call it man-made because it's not from the solar system. It's not created by the sun. It's not created by the stars. It's not created by the universe. That's what we call anthropogenic man-made radiation, man-made radiation. And there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against man-made radiation, hence the reason they're doing all these studies. Don't worry, I'm only going to tell you another 500 tons for the end of the year. The entire nuclear core and the fuel pools ejected right out of the reactor. Like every nuclear scientist has seen that picture, knew that they lost the entire inventories of the reactors. The entire inventories. So why would you let people go back into a nuclear wasteland? He said he cannot shake off the fatigue these days. No, because radiation saps your strength, right? You're producing more white blood cells and red blood cells now. And white blood cells, red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition. So you're displacing that for every white blood cell, you have to displace a red blood cell. It may sound strange, but my determination to remain a resident of Fukushima is growing firmer. Yeah, but it's just lack of friggin' oxygen. Following a nuclear disaster, 88,000 victims fled when the government issued an evacuation order. You had to wait for the government to tell you to get out of a nuclear wasteland. Many of them never got out till way too late. I mean, that's the problem. This is why they have up to 100, 150 sirens around a nuclear plant in North America. Well, the original idea was so you can get the frig out of Dodge. Now they want you to turn the TV and wait for them to tell you what to do next. Gotta wait for them to tell you that it's too late. Like the industry's legacy, like a difficult return zone. I'll show you what that means. The annual radiation dose is more than 150 millisieverts, 50,000 microsieverts. Like you're breathing it in. You're not talking millisieverts. Microsieverts and millisieverts is not very helpful. You're breathing it in. You're physically breathing it in. You're drinking it in the water. You're eating it. Look at North America, 450,000 tons above detection levels, persisted for weeks. Well, that plume would have every other isotope in it, not just the xenon-133. For every xenon-133, there's at least that much 135. Very high concentrations of hot particles, including plutonium and americium. So how bad is it in a nuclear wasteland if it's that bad in the United States and Canada? And children with 11 atoms a kilogram start to see heart problems. Well, gee, what does that mean, I wonder? Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels. A becquerel is a pulse of energy. So 50 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137. Irreversible heart damage. Canada, United States was hit with 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. So we far exceeded that number right there. So what's that going to do to the species? The birds, the mammals, the animals, the insects, all the species. It's going to wipe them out. The Conference of Parties wants you to believe that nuclear is the solution to what nuclear has already done. And no dissenting voices are allowed, particularly me. I'm just hated. I'm hated because I'm a good person. They can never be a good person. It reminds me of how lacking in any kind of humanity they actually are. They only got the job is because they lack humanity. Anonymous source, community of 6,000 people were assumed to have evacuated from a high radiation area. They had not. Eventually happened 3 months after the meltdown. The government doctor came and said it's okay to eat the local food, which is, like, we've covered a lot of these so-called government doctors. These are literally monsters in every sense of that word. And they're the most chicken-neck coward monsters you'll ever see. Come in and tell the victims they're okay and walk away with a big fat paycheck. That's it's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Congress, parliaments, diets don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you. Make it illegal that it's illegal to poison you with radiation. Only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission of each country has that authority, and they're switched out every few years, right? And their job is to, your parliaments and your Congress, for instance, they have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with 3,000 plus chemicals. But they don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with anthropogenic man-made radiation, which nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against. And they don't have the authority to make it illegal? Otherwise, you couldn't murder your loved ones in the hospital. If you look at what they're doing to your loved ones in the hospital, and you don't appreciate that that's a genocide, then you're a very, very well-trained slave. New York Times, government to focus on 8,000 square miles most contaminated by Fukushima fallout. The whole planet was. The whole planet was brutalized by radioactive fallout. Not just 8,000 square miles of Japan. Of evil, evil, evil radioactive fallout. Nobody knows how to clean it up. Resident urine now radioactive, measuring at least 3,000 microsieverts in all 15 people tested. They're only looking for gamma, which is still brutal numbers we're talking about. But why would you measure it in millisieverts? It's physical atoms. You don't breathe in energy. You don't consume or drink energy. It's physical atoms that produce that number. So if you're reading that number, it's way higher than that. And so if you're talking about 3,000 microsieverts, think of at least a microsievert minimum as 750 physical anthropogenic man-made atoms. And that each atom is in your body pulsing energy at the speed of light, destroying your chromosomes, your cells, your DNA every second for the rest of your life. And if you got that much, it's never going to stop bioaccumulating on top of that, so it's going to get worse every day until you finally die. Astronomical amount of radiation in downtown Tokyo. Oh, I thought United Nations said nothing got out. In fact, they said that repeatedly. Nothing got out. Found downtown Tokyo. Horrific readings where the kids played in Fukushima. Extreme levels found where food is grown for elementary school lunches. Radioactive forest, a permanent risk. How come United Nations is not putting that in the equation of nuclear's false? Every gust of wind showers cesium particles over the village. So they go in and use to get up on the roof with brooms to sweep the roof and say that's decontamination. They use power wash to spray the roofs and say they're decontaminated. It's the most absurd thing imaginable. It's not like a dirty car, it's radiation, for goodness sakes. You're just going to put it somewhere else. And you can't remove it. A lot of it's electrically charged, so you can't just remove it that way either. Enormous spread of radiation levels so high in the hills of Lydia that locals dare not go near the 150,000 microsieverts a year outside the official's home. 150,000 microsieverts, 150 millisieverts, 150,000. So let me do the math so you can kind of visualize what I'm talking about here. At least my mouse is working. My keyboard is not working for my external, but... Okay, so 150,000. This is how many atoms is outside his house per square meter, right? Or is that per kilogram? I'm just saying outside of his house. So multiply it by 750. Now we're being very conservative by saying a microsievert is 150 atoms. That's 112 million atoms. Just a single atom in your body will eventually trigger an autoimmune disease, illness, deficiency in your body for the rest of your life. What's 112 million going to do? And why would you measure it in millisieverts, for goodness sakes? Because this is physical atoms we're talking about with that number. We converted it to physical numbers. Now, this is by no means the final digits. I'm being very conservative by using 750 counts per millisievert, microsievert. There's 1,000 microsieverts in a millisievert. It's catastrophic. So why would you measure it anywhere outside the nuclear plant in millisieverts or microsieverts? Why would you do that? Well, because that's how you cover up the real true numbers, the incredible harm that goes with those real numbers. So if you want to go in the hills, then what the frig are you doing in Lydia? Pregnant women are used for decontamination activities after Fukushima nuclear meltdowns, says the report. So why would you want to trust United Nations when you see stuff like this? How does that work? How do you excuse all the things I showed you tonight? How do you give them a pass? Right? Like how does that work? %70 of the children tested are contaminated with radioactive cesium. all of them from outside of Fukushima. 70% of the children are contaminated. Like, the word contamination shouldn't apply to children. It should be 70% of the children are poisoned with brutal radioactive cesium. And by proxy, for every cesium-137 you're talking about, by the way, there's 100 strontium-90 produced. A bone seeker. These are catastrophic. You can't use the word contaminated when it's ingested. It's a poison. So just hang on a second. I'll explain why I'm saying that. I'm not sure if I'll get a show in tomorrow night. I'm pretty burnt out. It's just because I'm doing all these exercises now every day, all these calisthenics. I'm in the sauna today for 25 minutes. I thought I was going to die. I was actually weak after. And the red light therapy brought me around after that. But my whole body was aching when I got up this morning. And I was like, all I want to do is start doing calisthenic stretching so I could limber up a little bit, get in the sauna. And I went and done a bunch of research on the sauna and the red lights. Now, the reason I'm using the red light therapy is because typically we were early risers, right? And every morning when the sun is rising up, you got a 30-minute or so window of red light. It's very important to your body. And so you got that 7 days a week, right? 350. You were up early every morning, bed early. When I was a kid, of course, you went to bed just after it got dark, and you got up long before daylight. So you cut the daylight every morning. There was no chemtrails back then, so you got a lot of sunshine back in those days. Hang on here. I'm going to lose track. Here's why. I most likely will do a show tomorrow night, but there's no guarantee. It won't be because I don't want to. It's just because I'm going to be busted up again tomorrow. I know I will. I most likely will, mind you, but here we go. We're out. Thyroid. I got it this time, I'm sure. Here we go. So there's one of these, we'll get there. So females are 4 times more vulnerable to radiation than males. Just bear with me 1 second here. So 70%, we started off with 70% of the children are poisoned with radioactive cesium. 43% of the kids have thyroid abnormalities in new Fukushima test results. Child's risk of cancer is actually not 10 to 100 times higher than an adult. It's thousands of times higher. It's not just cancer. A single particle can cause a tumor. So this study here, the children, there's 38,200 children in Fukushima with thyroid tumors. Now, they downplayed it, but that doesn't mean it's not real. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. It used to be 1 in a million pre-Fukushima, one maybe 2 in a million. They do have 56 reactors, right? So there is a lot of radiation from the fuel pools already. But after Fukushima, in the first year, not only was there 865,000 extra cancers, extra cancers, and cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiency or injury. There's heart and liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. The first studies they do after nuclear accidents are autism, Down syndrome. What does that tell us? So 13,646 out of 38,200 children is 35.8%. So when you scale it up, there's 358,000 out of a million, when it used to be 1 or 2 per million. And the tumors are on the thyroids. The child's thyroid is only around 2 centimeters. An adult's 3 by 5 centimeters, the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland produces the hormones for the function of your bodies. And for children, more importantly, for 25 years, it's for the development of their entire body. And so when you're talking about numbers like this, and you're talking realistically about the numbers I showed you tonight, you're being honest, then not only are they producing, the tumors are the same size as their thyroid gland, which also means they're producing brutal radioactive hormones for the entire function of their body, which is not designed for anthropogenic man-made radiation. Right, your thyroids are not, even though they do use it, but they use it in a bad way, radioactive hormones. And then you got to be the same issue, the yin and the yang got to be the same issue of bone seekers, which means the children, the small species, the new babies, animals every year, the babies of humans every year, the babies of all the species are producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells on a scale that we've never encountered. And they knew this is what's happening. They knew this is what has happened, and they knew this a long time ago. Yet they're promoting nuclear as a solution to all these issues. More of it. Incredible censorship again tonight. I got 22 likes, 22 viewers. So these are catastrophic numbers in the first year, for goodness sakes. Why would you want more of that on your planet? Plutonium escaped Fukushima reactors. We estimated with the numbers that and the percentages that are public, there could have been 260,000 pounds of plutonium escaped Fukushima. If you're an honest person, right? If you take the documentation I showed you earlier tonight, the actual damage of the missing reactors and the fuel pools into account, that's what the number you're going to end up with. So 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures means it's consuming steel and rebar and cement and water and dirt and everything else, atomizing, aerosoling, ionizing, and radiating, and releasing that into the environment as radioactive particles. And the fuel itself become particulates, and the particulates are splitting atoms. So you have particulates covering the whole planet that are splitting atoms. And you also have that, the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod is the curium isotopes. And curium isotopes is pretty unique. Let me explain that right quick. Is there such a thing as quick anymore? I don't do anything quick. Let me give this a little tug to see if I can get the chummy to work for me. Keyboards to work for me. Don't mind me, I'm just carrying on. I have another way of doing it, the hard way. It'll take me a second though. Because I try to get around it, so I got to figure out a solution for the moral or the next show we do anyway. There we go. I was trying to be funny, but that'll probably get chopped out now. I'm saying, look, Dana's crazy. There we go. You tell me how crazy I actually am. Oh, hang on a second. I forgot. Okay, it don't matter. Let's do this. So I'm going to talk about curium isotopes for a second. So the study on beagle dogs and beagle puppies, 144 beagle dogs and puppies, they were given a single monodispersal inhalation of plutonium. Tumors of the lungs, the skeleton, and the liver. So they got 3 tumors from the plutonium, the 144 beagle dogs. Bone tumors found in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death of the 144 dogs, was bone tumors in 93 dogs, then lung tumors and liver tumors. And tumors in these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal or competing causes of death. These findings of dogs suggest similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to plutonium. But it was discovered that the human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than the animal kidneys that remove the plutonium. Now that study that made that assertion, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute from New Mexico, Albuquerque, is the United States Navy Research Institute. And they call it Loveless, and they kill beagle dogs and puppies. So they die a horrible death, right? But the reality of it is that the human kidneys are 50 times less efficient than the animal kidneys. That's pretty important too, isn't it? So you're 50 times more vulnerable than all the dogs that died of multiple tumors. You're 50 times more likely to die than all the dogs are that died, every one of them. But the biggest byproduct by the same institution, the U.S. Navy, Dr. Raymond Gilmedy, the lead author typically, curium compounds, application of human exposure data. The curium isotopes are the major byproduct in the radiated nuclear fuel. And curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium does. So the biggest releases from Fukushima wasn't cesium, wasn't iodine, it was curium. U.S. banned agricultural fishery products from 14 prefectures in Japan in 2013, 2 years too late. It must have been a new administration, I guess. Kyoto News used hot zones to describe Miyagi, Iwate, and Tochigi prefectures, not just Fukushima. Well, the food was banned in 14 prefectures because they were nuclear wastelands. And they were banned by 55 countries, not just the United States. How are we doing here? Oh, wow. Well, I got another couple to get through, and then we'll wind it down. Baby food maker ignored info on cesium contamination for weeks. Yeah, United Nations is your best friend, folks. It's not. But I mean, how sadistic to target the babies. Britain is a pretty interesting example. Here's the next one. So 11 atoms a kilogram, 11 becquerels a kilogram will cause permanent harm to children. For babies, it's a lot less than that. So they knew it was radioactive. They only acknowledged cesium. They refused to acknowledge the other isotopes. And they were allowed to do this because United Nations was in charge. Japan is too scared to tell the people the truth. But then somebody else should have told us the truth. Over 30,000 atoms a square meter in Nagano, 250 kilometers from the meltdown. Tokyo has the third highest levels of cesium testing location throughout Japan. Oh, you mean United States and Canada? It was actually higher. Okay, a little bit of a struggle for me now, I apologize. And it's like that sometimes. Like, telling the truth is harder than telling a lie, because I have to provide the facts for everything. I have to provide the documentation for every one of my assertions. Not only because it's an educational program, but because that's the right thing to do. That's why I built this whole operation the way I built it. So I can provide the information and hopefully make the world a better place. And maybe save the species, some of the species, from the annihilation of UN's nuclear policy, which is to pretend nuclear has no adverse side effects whatsoever. Which is unconscionable. It's unconscionable. And they're in charge of most of the facets of our lives worldwide, yet we don't acknowledge it or even understand it for the average person. That doesn't mean what I'm saying is not true. And what that means, though, is we're in a lot of trouble, because this organization is embedded with 195 governments and universities and medias, so they're very influential. But they're still terrified of any dissenting voices. And so I am censored heavily, brutalized censorship. Constipated Party 30 have done nothing for 30 years. You know why? Because they're the worst humans conceivable. They didn't tell you about Fukushima. You know why? Because nuclear would be hated worldwide immediately. And rightfully so. Appropriately so. Morally and ethically, we have to fight with every soul in our body against this industry at all costs. I got curb stomped on my pole tonight. Holy smoke. Should Conference of Parties 30 include 80 years of nuclear fallout? The nuclear tests, these are separate. Nuclear fallout and nuclear tests. Ocean dumping. It wasn't just the oceans, it was your landfills. It's all your smoke detectors, which are americium-241, and all your dumps is incinerated, and that radioactive fallout is an enormous contributor to illnesses and diseases worldwide. 1,000 fuel pools splitting atoms from thousands of reactor cores worldwide with no containment into the environment. Almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. And the nuclear meltdowns are catastrophic, all the way from Chalk River to Windscale, to Santa Susana, to Hanford, to the national laboratories that had meltdowns during the development and have been, because they weren't commercial operators, they're not included in the data. James got a intermission. I might play one of my favorite songs of James Lucid's that I got. Not might, I will after. I'm going to play his intermission. I'm going to play Nuclear Exceptionalism. So there's going to be 2 in a row coming up. And this is one he just posted. So that should be fun. He got attacked for his neutron embrittlement video. So get over and give him some support on that video. And just let me get the other song ready from the same site before I play that one. Well, actually, I can play this one. Then I'm going to play Nuclear Embrittlement from James Sue. We'll see everybody on the next show. Get your vote in on the poll before the second song is over. It'll count. Take care.
To host COP30 in Belém, tens of thousands of trees were removed from the Amazon. Not in error, by design. This is what climate diplomacy looks like when no one's watching.
Remember, they cut 8 miles of road, and then they built a site there so they could have their conference parties. Disgusting. It's disgusting. Imagine, this is what the United Nations done, folks. James got an incredible insight for us. 8 miles highway into the Amazon forest so they can save the forest with their propaganda, with more nuclear. It's excellent, man.
That one's my favorite.
They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up beside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried.